So the good people over at Wiser Books sent me a stack of books. A stack, okay? And I'm slowly but surely making my way through these books. So today we're going to review this one, okay? Many of you have seen this one already. It just came out fairly recently. And it's a tarot guidebook, The Cards You're Dealt, by Theresa Reed, the Tarot Lady. How to deal when life gets real. So if you're on Instagram or Facebook, you can look up the Tarot Lady. And she posts, I think she posts about astrology too, pretty frequently. So today we are going to review this book. I read the entire thing and I'm going to tell you my thoughts. I'm going to tell you what it's about. I'm going to tell you what to expect and what kind of person might want this in their library. My name is QueenAusetHeru, and thank you for joining me for another wonderful edition of Ask an Aquarius. If you haven't already, please hit the red subscribe button and smack the bell. Also, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and pass it on to someone else who's curious about this book. Let me see. Please drop us a positive comment in the comment section. And if you want to get a reading done, please email me or hit me up on social media. I will be glad to do a reading for you. What else? My Ask an Aquarius merchandise is underneath this video. My Patreon is underneath this video. And it's Christmas time. So if you want to send me a gift, you know gifts are my love language. My Amazon wish list and my PayPal and probably my Cashapp are underneath this video. So let's get started. So first and foremost, right? Let me move the microphone. This book is broken into two sections. In the table of contents, you're going to see part 1, Tarot 101, and part 2 is spreads for guidance. Now, I'm going to tell you up front. Part 1 is really for somebody who's a beginner. When I read part 1, it wasn't anything in it that I didn't already know. So if you're somebody who's a seasoned reader, part 1 probably won't tell you a lot of things that are new. But part 1 I think is really important because even though I didn't always agree with the stuff that she said in part 1, these are very important considerations to make if you're going to be reading, especially for other people. This book for me, you can use this with other people or you can use it just strictly with yourself. But regardless, there are a lot of questions in here, especially if you're going to be reading for another person. I'll give you an example. Listen to this, right? It says tarot is not a mind reading tool. Asking about what someone is thinking isn't productive for the tarot. The same goes when asking questions that are none of your business. Now, I totally disagree with this. I believe you can ask any question you want. I mean, hey, you can ask literally any question you want. Now, there are some questions I wouldn't be comfortable with answering. Like if somebody said, what is the death? When will I die? What's my death date? Or something like that. I wouldn't feel comfortable answering that because a number of factors will go into that. And that's not going to do anything to help them with that. It's going to happen anyway. So all I'm going to do is terrorize them for whatever amount of time that they have. It could be 50 years. It could be 15 minutes. So I think you do have to take into consideration what kind of questions you're comfortable answering about yourself and others. Even though I didn't necessarily always agree with her assessment of it, I do agree that these are very important conversations. Also in this part, she talked about like helping your client reword their question. And I really wasn't feeling that idea either because like I let my client ask their question. I don't help them reword the question or tell them that's not an empowering question or things like that. I wouldn't do that to a client. I'm going to listen to their question. I'm going to intuit what they want to know. And I'm going to shuffle the cards and tell them what I see. Period. But again, these are important considerations. And she says something really important here at the end of this chapter. On page 16, she says, make tarot your own. So this is what she believes. And these are the ideas that she and maybe many others are thinking when they're reading tarot. But that doesn't mean that you have to agree or not. It just means that you should consider that part. So that was cool. Then it gets into the tarot card meanings. And this part here, she talks about each and every single card. And what I liked about this part a lot is that from all the cards in the major arcana, there is a journal prompt, there's a practice idea, and there's a pro tip. And I really love that, because a lot of times when I do readings for a person, a certain card will keep on coming up. And if that happens, giving them this journal prompt could really be helpful for them to go inside of themselves and figure out why do they keep getting that card and what is it trying to say to them on a deeper meaning, even at beyond my interpretation. Let me give you an idea of a practice. Practice says, embody the energy of the Empress by creating a self-care day for yourself. Clear your calendar, soak in the tub, get a massage, and eat food you love. You can also practice by, you can also practice her loving energy by sending a care package to someone struggling. So the loving energy of the Empress by sending someone a care package who's struggling. That's sweet. And then the pro tip says, sometimes tarot readers play the role of the Empress with their clients, but you must be careful you don't cross a line by creating codependence. That is true. That is important. So keep your readings clean by maintaining healthy boundaries at all times. Again, definitely important. So I would say a great deal of what she said here, I definitely agree with. And I love that pro tip practicing journaling part. That is awesome. And it continues on. She continues to do that all the way through as she talks about each of the major arcana. Pro tip. I like this one a lot. I want to read this one. Never let a client walk away from the table feeling hopeless. Even in difficult situations, you can use the cards to find solutions or solace. Treat your tarot deck like a tool for healing, and it will become that. I thought that was beautiful, and I definitely agree with that. So like I said, most of the stuff that she talked about, I definitely agree with her. I had a couple of, areas. Of course, you're not going to agree with every author, but I like the book overall. Now, the minor arcana does not have the practice or the pro tip, but it does have the journaling prompt. So you're only going to get all of that, in the major arcana. All right, so then it continues to go through. Let's see. Yes, it continues to go through all of the rest of the major arcana, all the way through the Pentacles, and then it gets into part 2. So part 2 of the book is really my favorite part, and I'm going to tell you why. In part 2, she is talking about life situations. So whether or not you're dealing with yourself or you're dealing with clients, she's talking about life situations that are difficult. And when I say difficult, I mean difficult. Like when a client want to come to you and talk about illness, for example. They're ill or they're taking care of somebody who's sick. It tells you all kind of things to think about, questions that the person might want to ask. Sometimes the client has no questions. They come to me and they're like, this is going on in my life. Tell me what you see. In a case like this, some of these questions will really come in handy. She shows you different spreads. She shows you how to use them. She shows you examples of each spread. She talks about being a caregiver. She talks about different breath work and meditation that can help you when doing this kind of work. She talks about boundaries. So it's a lot of spreads in here for tough things. This part right here I'm looking at is about grief. All the spreads and the questions in here and the simple like self-care type tips that she has are really helpful when you or your client is going through something really bad. And she goes through all of that. Let me see. And she also has little tips that will help, like maybe helping the client to open up more, for example. Here's one here. You may want to have different decks for the client to choose from. I advise keeping decks with scary images out of the rotation at this time, because the last thing you want is to instill fear and anxiety. An excellent deck to use is the Connolly Tarot, which has peaceful pictures. So you got to think about, and remember I said a lot of these things are things you really need to think about if you're going to be, reading for yourself for others. Like, you might not want to use a deck like that has scary images. I would personally want to use like the Bumbleberry Hallows Tarot, something cute, something happy, something fun. So yeah, she's giving you a lot of ideas about these kind of things. She also talks about how emotional it can be, and gives you some ideas about that. The person might get sad, the person may cry, they may get angry. She also gives some anointing rituals and some other rituals that you can use. She talks about also having with you resources, so like grief resources, or so you can give the client and say, here, here's this hotline, or here's this link. You can get some grief resources or some depression resources or things like that. Mental health, things along those lines. And she gives us some in the back of the book. She also gives us some further recommended reading, which I think is really helpful as well. And then she tells us a little bit about herself. So overall, what do I think about this book? I think that this book is one that you can use if you are a beginner, definitely. But not only, if you're somebody like myself who's been reading for 20 years, all those spreads in the back and the considerations that I talked about thinking about are really good. So I think anybody really can use this book. I would say, I'm trying to sit here and think of like, what's my favorite part of the book? My favorite part is definitely part 2. My favorite part are the pro tips. My favorite part are the spreads. So like I said, if you're somebody who is into tarot, into reading for yourself or reading for other people, and you want some more hard-hitting spreads or some more hard-hitting questions for those difficult topics, this would be a great book for you. And like I said before, remember I talked about in the very beginning with the major arcana where she gives all of the journal prompts? I think is really helpful because the major arcana and the minor have a journal prompt. And I think journaling is very helpful. So like I said before, you might find yourself doing a spread, and let's say you do like a mind, body, spirit spread, for example. Then you can look and see what journal questions go for each aspect. So what should your mind be focusing on? What should you focus your body on? What should you focus your spirit on? Things like that. So I think that the book is extremely helpful, and I think it's very useful in that way. I definitely liked part 2 more than part 1. Not that anything was wrong with part 1. I think what it was just that I think that I felt like it was more for somebody, like I said, more for a beginner. That's what I felt. I felt like that part, just that one part, not the part with the cards, but the part in the very beginning where she's talking about the considerations. I felt as though it was more for a beginner, so I got kind of bored with that part. But it's only because I've read those things 30,000 times, So if you've read a lot of tarot books, that very first part, you're going to be like, okay, I've heard this 9,000 times. It's kind of like when your mom keeps telling you something over and over again, and you're like, okay, mom, I heard you. It felt like that, But then when I got into the cards and then I got into part 2, it began to really unravel for me how I could use it as a tool. So I think it's a good tool to have on your, in your reference material. I keep certain books for reference. This is a great reference book. And like I said before, the questions and doing some of the things in there yourself, like the one about the Empress and doing the self-care stuff. That's awesome. So if I see myself getting that card a lot, maybe that's another sign to me like, hey, maybe some of your self-care could be, maybe you need to soak or whatever the case is, So that's the book. That's the cards you're dealt. I like it, and I think that a lot of you will too. And I want to thank the good people over at Wiser for sending it over. And you come back soon because I got a lot more book reviews because I got a lot more to say. See you later.